Good afternoon, everyone. This should be a very interesting discussion, although we have a relatively speaking short period of time. As everyone is aware, FITRA is getting ready to have its first birthday here very shortly. And as a result of that, much like with many things that come through Congress, policy-wise, law, et cetera, we learn kind of through the years what's working, what's not, and how can we improve upon things. So kind of a starting point, and Steve, I'll start with you. Maybe you could give us a perspective from Congress, how they're viewing FITRA, the questions that are coming back now as we get about a year into this, and looking at both, not just the spirit of the legislation, but also the follow-up and the enforcement pieces they're looking at.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting us to spend a little bit of time with you talking about FITRA in a fun way, and I really do mean this in a humorous, fun way. After testifying a couple weeks ago in front of Congressman Connolly, who, as you know, along with Darrell Issa, were the two sponsors of FITRA, he made a couple points very clear. First of all, he does absolutely plan to hold every federal CIO and their secretaries accountable for what's in FITRA and for implementation thereof. The second thing, playfully, he said was, one of the things that Clinger-Cohen actually did was lay out most of what's reinforced in FITRA today. But both Clinger and Cohen left Congress not too long after that bill was passed. And Congressman Connolly made it very clear, I intend to stick around forever until we get all of this stuff done. And I think the practical side of this will vary by agency. What is new in my mind, it reinforces that while the CIOs are going to be held accountable along with their executive leadership, this is really a joint CXO enablement. The CIOs have to work very, very collaboratively with our chief acquisition officers, our chief financial officers, and our chief human capital officers in actually moving the tenets, principles, and outcomes of FITRA forward.
Well, that's interesting. Richard, maybe you could talk a little bit about how Congress is looking to score the various agencies and how that score might help you implement or look at change that needs to be driven back through the agency itself.
Well, I had the chance to testify, I guess it was last week. And the initial scorecard was in 4 areas. It was in data center consolidation, incremental development, IT portfolio savings, and risk assessment. And none of us did very good. The report cards were pretty harsh, but we deserved them, so I'm not dodging mine. You know, I told somebody, I said I could probably argued real hard and gotten some of my F's turned into D's, but that never worked at home, and I don't think it wouldn't have worked with Congress. You know, it just shows that we're a long way from where we need to be. And you know, I came out of that hearing really optimistic because I felt like the congressman signaled to me, and Steve probably felt the same thing when he was there. There's that, you know, accountability side, but I also feel like they're extending their hand, that they want to help, and that I think they've got a grasp of, you know, these are difficult issues, and that, you know, I had a really good back and forth with several of the members about, you know, if I could drive down savings, you know, they are willing to explore how we can reinvest that money. You know, that they understand it's just not about driving down cost, it's about driving up service delivery. So I came away from that very optimistic that they were going to be fair with their measures, they were going to be fair with their oversight, but, you know, they're not going to let up. You know, Representative Connolly said to me afterward, he said, I hope you noticed, Richard, that there's 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans up here, and there's not a sliver of daylight between the 4 of us. And that's very rare, and you need to take advantage of that.
Steve, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, if I could add one thing to what Richard is relaying here. One of the areas that I'll point out that I believe is actually a little bit different than perhaps how we've operated under Clinger-Cohen and how we're expected to operate by both Congress and OMB is in the specific area of involvement of the CIO in the budget development, evaluation, and resolution process. I would argue that in most of my previous CIO roles and my current one, the CIO has oversight, but I don't really roll up my sleeves and get involved at the component level in the development of their budgets. I believe, based on conversations with both Tony Scott and OMB, as well as some of the congressmen that we're talking about, there's an expectation that that will actually change. Now, realistically, we as single individuals can't be involved in every component's development of every budget line item. But there's an expectation that we will, in fact, do more than just review documents that show up in our office and then scribble our name on something that says, yes, I reviewed this. I think the expectation is very clear that we will actually be much more involved than CIOs have been previously. What do you guys think?
Joyce, maybe you could comment from the USDA perspective as to how this legislation will help the CIO make progress of change relative inside the agency.
Well, for USDA, because we are 29 component agencies, it's very difficult for our CIO, Jonathan Album, to kind of get around to all of the agencies themselves. And as Steve said, we have formed a very strong partnership with all of the CXOs. We have also gone to all of our executive boards, our E-board, our sub-cabinet, and our agency heads to explain exactly what FITRA is, the value that FITRA has for each one of their agencies, the what's in it for me, and the expectation that the CIOs will be at the table for the budget formulation and the budget execution. We also will have a list of, I say, the get out of jail card. So if the component agency would like to have more authority and more independence over creating that budget, and that we know for sure that that budget is going to be clear and clean and the data is going to be good when it passes over to us, then we will have those kinds of criteria. For those agencies that have not met that criteria, we're going to have more scrutiny by the CIO.
It's interesting, one of the comments that we had discussed earlier, and one of the things that we certainly see from a business perspective, is that many times there are a lot of IT component pieces inside of major programs, whether we're looking at the DoD side in weapon systems, whether we're looking at actual programmatic activity that may come out of commerce or transportation or agriculture, for even for that matter. And this is an opportunity to probably get our hands around that at some component and expose where there could be cost savings across multiple programs. I wonder if any of you could comment on what type of opportunity that then presents back to the agencies and to the secretaries relative to additional savings or efficiencies, agility that can be brought across multiple programs of record, even in that matter.
Well, you know, I've told a lot of folks, and I would share with you, that I'm going to use FITRA out of the gate to set a baseline. I think one of the things that's most frustrating for me is that I don't have good IT cost metrics. We don't have a standard taxonomy across the operating administrations for how we categorize IT spend. A lot of the IT spend gets buried in program budgets, and it's not easy to pull it out. I think, as Steve alluded to, the strengthening the relationship between the CFO, the CIO, and the CAO is one of what I'm engaging with them is we've got a tiger team we've put together, and all the C-suites are represented, and we're going to go into each of the operating administrations, and we're going to figure out exactly what we're spending on IT, where is it, where our assets are. You know, I keep referring to it as I want an as-is blueprint. I want to know where we are right now, and as part of that, as part of invoking the authority of FITRA, I've put a moratorium on IT spend until we can have this baseline. Put down the fork. It's time to, get a good understanding of where we are, what we've got, what we plan, what our plans are, and then we can proceed with some cost measures and some ways of measuring things that, we don't have. And it's, it's trite, but it's true that you can't manage what you can't measure. And so we're going to start by measuring things. And it's going to be dirty at first. I'm sure our first take on it, the data, you will probably find a lot of holes and a lot of inconsistencies. But that's the point. The point is, after that first round of discovery, we'll do some analysis, we'll have an iterative process, and we'll get better at it, and I think until we do that, I think we're not going to be able to really chart a course to the future.
For agriculture, it's going to put real teeth in our acquisition approval process. We have what we call an AAR at USDA, and it goes through and it basically takes apart the Rubik's Cube and exposes every single aspect of that particular acquisition, including whether they have an authority to operate, whether they have met certain criteria, and if it does not have an AAR number on it, when it goes down to acquisition, then acquisition will kick it back.
Yeah, in addition to similar types of things that you heard Joyce and Richard describe, at the Department of Commerce, we're leveraging FITRA in a little bit of a different way, but fully compliant with FITRA. The department has launched a shared services initiative, and this encompasses basically all of what most of us would think of as the back office functions: HR, finance, acquisition, and IT. It's been a year in the making. We're now actually moving into deployment, and our first acquisition around shared services, HR services, is actually on the street. It's been released. And we intend to kind of follow during FY16 with a number of additional acquisition. They'll come out as RFIs first and then followed by an appropriate acquisition vehicle. Might be a statement of services as opposed to a more traditional RFP. But what we're doing is we are incorporating all of the tenets of FITRA into accomplishing our shared services objectives and goals. So for example, in using what Richard is doing, we too have to establish common cost criteria. What's the unit cost of an IT service delivered around, fill in the blank for whatever the service is? So that in addition to needing that for the FITRA common baseline, we're also leveraging that, and we'll use that to benchmark against whatever we achieve in efficiencies and economies of scale through our shared services initiative. We think that's a unique way of leveraging FITRA. We'll let you know how it turns out.
I think that's a good point. I mean, the view of how we might have measured something back in 2011 will be considerably different than the way we measure something in 2017 and beyond. And if we don't take that into account, the numbers become just a set of numbers and not really realistically representing what's going on in terms of efficiency and agility. I thought it might be also interesting, one of the interesting pieces that came out of the hearing with Congress was some of the discussions around the ability to make investments to then show an ROI. In the commercial enterprise sector, if the CIO wanted to make some changes to the environment, he or she would go to the CFO, have a discussion about, here's where we're looking to invest, and here's the return we're going to drive back to the business. Historically, Congress has been very good about this. They kind of take the perspective, no, we're going to cut your budget, hence your savings. So I wonder maybe if you all could comment about what we see maybe of a willingness from Congress at this point in time to take it maybe a little bit of a different approach, or at least open to hearing different types of ideas.
I think, and this is honestly, I think, I don't know. I think that Congress is very willing to kind of collaborate and work with us in determining how does one go about putting an ROI on something like infrastructure. None of us have ever really, including myself, we've never really figured out exactly what the perfect business case is for a technology upgrade across a whole bunch of installed infrastructure components. Think infrastructure for a minute. And I think a lot of us are beginning to realize that, look, wait a minute, maybe there's a different way to approach this. Think cloud first and think mobility for a second. Those two things are integral. I don't believe that you can have one without the other in the direction that most of us in the federal community are headed with IT. I believe, as we mentioned earlier, that we have to think about cost in a different way, and we have to think about the old financial return on investment in a very different way. A few of us met with Microsoft's CEO earlier today, and he said something that I think resonated with an awful lot of us. Return on investment might be better measured in terms of true productivity against mission delivery. That's a far more effective way for me to have a conversation with my secretary, deputy secretary, and every one of my agency heads. Because in truth, none of them really care about infrastructure. That's not what they're going to spend their time on. They expect that to be taken care of. And if you think utility model that all of us experience at home and many of us has used as an analogy, none of us care. If you flip the switch, a light switch, all you care about is the light coming on. You don't care about the power grid and how it works and all that kind of stuff. I've never sent any of my utility companies a thank you letter. I never plan on doing that. And the best thing that they're going to get is I pay my bill on time. Now, that's, I think, the exact analogy for infrastructure, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and we need to begin to work with Congress, with our CXO community, including our CFO, to figure out a way to measure value delivery, not return on investment.
And I think that's very key, the value of what we're offering, because we're offering value not only through the agency, but also through citizen services. All of us are involved in some way or another in delivering services to the American public. And so I'd like to refer to it as investment managers. You know, so all of us are investment managers, and it is beholden upon us to be good investment managers so that we can deliver those services that the American public paying good tax dollars for. And so that's how we're approaching it at USDA.
We have just a few moments left, and I wonder if the panelists could comment, Joyce, just kind of following on this. This legislation and the roles that each of you hold within your agencies is eventually about how do we drive a better government for America? How do we make us more responsive? How do we make us more agile? FITRA is but a step in that process. Are there other things out there that you all would like to see come to the forefront as a result of FITRA that you think will be additional agents for change down the road?
Go ahead. I would say more interagency collaboration. That I think that would be extremely valuable. Talk about shared services. You know, why are we inventing or developing things 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times over when if Steve has a great shared services model, why don't we all, you know, drive costs down by joining his particular opportunity, and the same with Richard. So I think being able to share services across agencies I think that should be the next step forward.
Anything?
Yeah, and I would say, you know, one of the things that the points I'm trying to drive at DOT is that I want us to pivot from the sort of the old way of doing things around data centers and start thinking about the infrastructure of the future being our pipes out to the cloud. That with the money that we've traditionally invested in developing raised floor and all that kind of environment, we need to pivot and build robust, scalable, fast, modern network, connecting all of our employees all across this country and to cloud service providers. And we have to go from, you know, sort of pivot from the old, you know, data center hosting model to being more of a service broker. And when I said that to the congressman, I suggested to them that the brick and mortar measure of data center consolidation, I think, is yesterday's ruler, if you will, and that I tried to respectfully suggest to them that I would like to see us measured more about cloud adoption and how we're migrating in that direction. And that was very, very well received. I got a bunch of attaboys for that. So.
Steve, any last comments?
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I absolutely will put big dittos around what Richard and Joyce both said. The one additional thing, I really would like us to continue to work across government and in collaboration with Congress to simplify IT acquisition. It's a painful, slow process today, no bad guys. It's just a painful, slow process. There are a lot of hoops that we have to jump through, legal and otherwise. If we could actually move toward very simple acquisition capabilities, park them in GSA, it's fine with me, that any of us can use, that would go a huge step forward toward achieving the desired results of FITRA.
Well, thank you. I'd like to thank the panelists, Steve, Joyce, Richard. Appreciate your comments on FITRA. We hope that over the course of the next 12 months we continue to see just as much progress. So thank you very much.